fifth episode of mind management using some adapted sutras from Patanjali's Yoga Sutra and applying those to our daily lives to reduce some stress, to reduce some anxiety, to give us some mental peace. As I say, it's not that it's going to be completely, I'm assuring you that you'll be free from all these, but these practices will definitely help you in ameliorating some of these issues. My prefaces will keep on getting shorter and shorter. So the description below this video contains the link to the playlist that contains the previous episodes. New viewers, I encourage you to watch them. If you like this video, then it would be good for you to watch the previous ones so that you can catch up. Without the previous ones, you may not be able to understand the rest of what is coming. In case you're interested in watching again, for the regular viewers who are watching, you can always use those episodes for a recap. If you think you have gained a little knowledge, even a little bit, and some understanding, I have given you something to take away. Please do subscribe to my channel, share this video, look at the playlist, subscribe to my channel, like this video, press the bell icon for getting notifications of subsequent videos. I find it difficult to say this all the time. I don't know why. So, Namaste, Namaskaram, greetings. I'm Ramakrishnan from Chennai, India. I will begin, as always, by stating the second aphorism from the first book. Patanjali's books are called Padas. There are 4 Padas. The first Pada is Samadhi Pada. In the second sutra, Patanjali very crisply in 4 words defines both the meaning of yoga and the object of yoga. Yogas chitta vritti nirodhaha. Chitta, mind stuff. Vritti, modification. Nirodhaha, restraint. Yoga is the restraint of the modification of the mind stuff. I'll start using less and less Sanskrit terms as we go on. We have already seen extensively, we have discussed in the previous episodes about chitta and the vrittis, and so I now want to take a pause in this episode, and so far I think maybe it has seemed to be all over the place, and it's like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. We have put them there, they are all in place now. We just need to fit them together and you will see the whole of it. So that's what I intend to do mainly in this episode, so that we are very clear in our minds about what we are going to address. Before that, in the previous episode, if you remember, those who watched, we talked about colored and uncolored modifications, vrittis, klishta and aklishta vrittis, and I said I'm going to use my own definition of klishta, which is colored in any way. As soon as an adjective gets attached to a modification, it becomes colored. That's my definition. I stress again, that's not the accepted definition of klishta, but for our purposes, I want to use this definition so that we can differentiate and start focusing. So, vrittas, modifications are colored or uncolored. We are going to focus on the colored modifications, and of that coloring also, we are going to be applying these practices that will come later to the negative colored modifications. Call them negative, bad. They primarily those that cause all these anxieties, worries, stresses, etc. So we have narrowed it down now. Our subject, our topic of what is the core, what is the problem, as we say, the root cause analysis, like I said the last time. We have now stated the problem. We have given the problem statement. The problem statement is the negative colored modifications of the mind stuff. So this is what we have come to. Now I'll put together the whole thing. We said we have a controller that is in charge of the 5 senses and the 5 organs of action. The controller gets inputs from the senses, does some basic processing. It has too much to do in getting perceptions itself, so it does not have much time or the capacity to do any further analysis. It does a basic analysis and sends it down to the processor. The processor has access, it accesses the database, the storehouse of knowledge, of memory, impressions, our experiences from birth to now. And again, I've said, I'll repeat it, I don't want to go into previous births, other controversial subjects. So let me start from this birth. So from this birth, all the memories, learnings, everything, etc., is contained in this data, in this database. Then the processor, it goes, the sensory input that has come in, it sees if there is any matching, it can match it in any way. It has an algorithm, so like Google or YouTube or whatever, it uses an algorithm to see what kind of the closest match, nearest match, what is best, and then it brings it back, and then it processes. That is where wisdom, knowledge, insight, all this is exerted by this processor, and to analyze this, like ChatGPT, and to give a very understandable output. Okay. And based on this output that itself generates, and then it decides whether what to do with it. Shall I now tell the controller to take some action, or does it stop here? So this is what the processor does. In this, now we have mentioned 3: the controller, the processor, and the database, the warehouse. And now we come to the ahamkara, the ego, which completes the jigsaw puzzle, the ego. As soon as the processor directs the controller to take an action, the ego immediately attaches itself to that action, and then we get the thought, I am doing this. That is where all this happens in, not even nanoseconds. It's instantaneous, so we don't. But if you think about it, this is the process broken up into pieces. So I hope this much is clear. Then we saw the modifications. I don't recollect much of whether we covered this topic, whether we covered all the 5 types of modifications. I think we listed them, if I remember right, and we said we would discuss them later, because the time for the klishta, the colored and uncolored itself, I think took some time. So we will get into a bit of the vrittis, the 5 types of vrittis, which have these 2 attributes. Each of them can have, it can be either klishta or aklishta, depending on what happens. Before I go into the detail, again, I remembered something which I use very often when somebody asks me. I said, if you recollect, we attach adjectives to certain things, and then that is what happens when it becomes colored, by attaching adjectives. And I also recollect saying that the guru had only a small group of students, because for a person, a klishta can be colored negative color, but the same klishta, the same modification can cause a positive coloring to somebody else. This is why my conjecture that in all our gurukuls and patashalas in those times that we have only heard about, they used to have only small groups of students, because each person needed to have personal attention. The teaching had to be tailor-made for that student. So I'll give an example. I've used this very often to some friends who knew that I was into the subject. When they used to ask me, I used to tell them, okay, consider a person who has gone through all stages of an interview, all done through Zoom and Team and con calls, etc., all the various means of communication that we have today. And now he has a final job interview. He's from Chennai, and the interview is in Delhi. And he wants to be very careful. He books his ticket so that he arrives one day in advance. before the interview, he has booked his accommodation, everything, and then he starts from home on his way to the airport, and his vehicle suffers a bad accident, and he has multiple fractures. And in the hospital, they tell him that his mobility is going to be very limited for the next month or so, and that he has to stay in hospital, with the leg pushed up with a chain, and everything in the cast that we see in movies. So that's what they tell him. And what kind of coloring do you think now this incident has cost him? What are the perceptions for the five senses? Well, of course, pain, but then emotions inside are also, which are stored in the warehouse, they are also brought to the surface. So then he gets that feeling of bad luck, cursing his misfortune, feeling of the pain, and the rest of it. A couple of hours later, he is informed that the flight in which he was supposed to travel has crashed. But this is just hypothetical, okay? That it has crashed and there are no survivors. Now, what do you think his state of mind is now? The same klishta that was negative, wouldn't it have turned positive now? Wouldn't he be thanking his good fortune that he had that accident? I want you to ponder over this. This is the way many things happen to us. An adjective that we attach to a modification for a period of time can suddenly change. You can think about such incidents in your own life. I want you to focus on that. I don't intend taking up too much time today. I realize I'm making my videos very long, so let's keep it short. So the last I remember about it is that we listed the 5 vrittis. I don't recollect, but we will list them anyway. There are 5. The modifications are of 2 attributes, that is colored and uncolored, and they are 5 types. And Patanjali and the commentators on his sutras, mainly Vyasa's Bhashya on Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, and Misra's gloss on that, they say that these 5 modifications cover the entire gamut of modifications that happen to us. They are modifications, they are the source of modifications also. I said this earlier. That might sound contradictory, but that's the way it is. So the first modification is real cognition, right knowledge. The second is false cognition, indiscrimination, inability to discriminate. The third is imagination, verbal delusion. The fourth is deep sleep. And the fifth is memory. I'm sure you have doubts, especially deep sleep and memory. How are these modifications? The first 3 are okay. They will cause some modifications, but we'll come to those 2. But mainly ultimately we'll focus on the first 2 or 3, because that's what makes sense. We will discuss only right knowledge, true cognition today. Patanjali says true cognition has 3 sources. The first is direct perception, which is what you feel with your 5 senses. That is what he means, and that is what we have discussed also, that the controller does. It takes in, brings it to the processor goes, comes back, and then if necessary directs the controller to take action through the organs of action. So the first one is direct perception. What we feel through our 5 senses is direct perception, and this it must be obvious, with some exceptions, that this is the most dependable. What we get through the 5 senses, they may be deceptive sometimes, but if we can say that relatively we depend upon something for gaining the right knowledge, true cognition, it is the five senses that we depend upon. And we will look at the perception through the direct perception. We'll discuss it. And then inference. There is no smoke without fire. And verbal authority. I think that is quite different now, given the amount of fake news and deep fakes, other things that go on nowadays. I don't know very much if we can trust the verbal testimony. According to Patanjali, it was verbal testimony of learned men or from the scriptures. I don't know how relevant they are today, how much we can rely upon, and how much true knowledge we can get from these sources. But we can look at the direct perception and inference as our most common sources of knowledge today. So, real cognition, right knowledge. We see a tree. The controller processes it through the eyes, gives it to the processor, goes back. Your memory has always been of a tree. Why? Did you know it at birth? Were you born with the knowledge that it is a tree? No. You were taught that it is a tree. People told you it's a tree. When you were young, when you asked, what is this? This is a tree. You heard other people referring to it as a tree. So now, because that memory is there, that knowledge is there, when you see that, you link it up with your database and immediately you get the perception tree. This is the way it works. Suppose someone had in your neighborhood, in your state, in your country, they were calling the tree a giraffe. And then you would also always say this is a giraffe, and if you went to Africa and saw that and somebody told you it was a giraffe, you would laugh at his face and say, no, 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 that's a tree. So I want to make it clear that, there are these not contradictions, but yes. So much of what we do, the sense organs that perceive and then pass on information, and the database, if you think about it, then ultimately it is what the sense has perceived, what the controller has then passed it on, how has it been stored inside. So from childhood, the thought that there is a tree has come into you. The processor has gone in, found out that there is nothing in the storehouse about a tree, so it has taken this and stored it in the knowledge. That's it, that it's a tree for later recollection. And then it brings it back. When it sees a tree again, it goes, fetches it and says it's a tree. So this is real cognition. The same applies to smell, taste, sound, touch. We say it's hot. If in some other country hot is cold, then it becomes cold. There is some amount of relativity in this. I hope you understand. And I think we also discussed before that we hardly use at simultaneously maximum 3 of our senses. So this is how this system processes the whole thing. So real cognition is direct perception is one. The second, inference, where there is no smoke without fire. That's the most common inference I can think about. But logically, it is you see something of which you know the cause beforehand. Again, it is there in the storehouse, that where there is a fire, there is smoke, has been seen, registered through our eyes and gone into the database. So when you see smoke, you think there is a fire. That is inference. it automatically comes. You can think of any other examples. I know you all can do it, so I don't want to keep harping on the same thing. Well, we are not going into scriptural authority and third party sources. These two itself are enough. Sometimes we say real cognition, but we will merge it into the next unreal cognition. On a hot day, in a road, we are traveling through a desert. You know what I'm talking about, I'm sure. We are driving a car, and what do we see in the distance on a hot day, driving through a desert? Our eyes see water. Is that real cognition? At that point of time, it is, isn't it? We think there is water there. But what happens when we near it, when we go near it? It disappears or it goes further away. Now, again, so what happened from real cognition? It became unreal for some time. And then when this happened repeatedly, the mind has stored, the processor has stored that also in the memory. It's out there. And then you are able to distinguish between what is real water and what is the mirage that you see of water. That capacity comes to you. Then you have real cognition. You now have discrimination. Unreal cognition is the inability to discriminate. I'll give you another example which is used very often in the Shastras. It is the example of you come into your room in the night and you see a snake lying on the bed. Without a second thought, you go bring a big stick and start, banging it to death. Even your cot might probably break down. You beat it so hard because you didn't even think anything. You just had to beat it up. And then you went and you switched on the light and you realized that it was your belt that was lying on the bed. So this is an example often used in our Upanishads and in the Vedas and in teachings for a distinction between discrimination. We will come to it. Viveka, Vairagya, those are topics. I will stop for today. Again, it's 25 minutes, but I think I've put the jigsaw puzzle together. The controller, the processor, the warehouse, the ego, and then the sensory inputs that come in that cause colored thoughts of good or bad, and we are going to focus on the bad and how now the real cognition comes in, and this with what we want to achieve, we will tie it up together again. I hope so far it is clear what I have said and described. This system is clear to you. Thank you very much for listening. Again, repeat, please, if you like what I've said, subscribe to my channel, share this video, look at the playlist, click the bell icon. I want the word to spread so that more people learn what is there in our ancient scriptures. Namaste, namaskaram, greetings.